So this is the second part of the CSS lecture. I'm going to be doing a demo of how to do the plot blocks assignment. So I'm going to start with making my HTML file, plotblocks.html. Okay, and then I'm going to grab the code that was provided for you guys here. Put this here, and then I'll save that. And then I'm also going to make a CSS file for it. And grab that code. Okay, and I'm going to then open the file. So and I'm going to grab this and move it over here. Okay, so this is our starting template, right? Or basically the code that we're given. Okay, so I'm first going to basically just think about how I would strategize building this. Okay, so one thing I notice in this diagram though is that, like, you have this gray container and you have this margin basically, right? That's consistent across the entire piece, right? So when you have margin and padding, you always have basically two ways to do it, right? So in this case, you see like this overlap, right, between this margin and this padding. If you want to, if you're like text, or let's say your background color, right, it starts like, let's say the background color of this starts like here, right? And then the background color of this one, or like, yeah, okay. So if you want to, like, get this to move, right, you can either shift this guy or you can shift this guy, right? Because like the padding in the margin, if you increase the padding, it would cause this box to move in relative to the orange one, right? Similarly, if you decrease the margin, the box would also move that way, right? But if you use a padding, then you're basically creating something that goes all the way around. So in this silver one's case, right, I'm better off creating a padding so I don't have to set a separate margin for each of these other blocks. Okay, so I'm going to start by doing that. Here is the silver one. I'm going to add a padding of, say, 20 pixels. Okay. So if I go back to this now and I reload the page, it looks like that. Right, so a little bit closer. Okay. Now from here, again, I have this blue one and the red one, right? I can add a top margin on my blue to get the shift down, as well as a top margin on my red to get it shift down, or I can just add a single bottom margin on the green. Right? So it's a little bit simpler to just add one margin, so I'm going to add it to the green one. So I can do bottom margin. Go back to here, page. Wait, is it margin bottom? Margin bottom. Okay. All right. So from here, bottom padding of which? Of which one? Which element?
The header.
Oh, the header. Oh, okay. Yeah. That would only work if you had something inside it, right? Yeah. Okay. So here I have this now. I need to these two blocks, right? I want to sit next to each other, the blue one and the red one. Okay. So again, right now blocks, if you like blocks, you go like this. So if I want to make them sit next to each other, I just have to change the display type to inline block. Okay. So I can go here and change the blue and red to inline block display, inline block. Okay, and then the red display, inline block. Okay, so things like that. All right, so I have this problem where the blue one is like a little too low now, right, relative to the red one. Okay, so whenever you have two things that are inline block, if they are different sizes, right, they will sit next to each other, but they'll all float to the bottom, okay, by default. So I got to get this guy to float up. So one way to do that is by adding like some like other margins,
But the simpler way to do that is to just set the vertical align type. So if you do vertical align top, it'll float the top. Okay. So, so this is how I actually recommend, like, lining things next to each other, right? When you need to shift them up, you do like vertical line top first, and then if I needed this one to be like a little bit lower, I just add like a top margin too, right? And then it would just drop down that tiny bit, and that way you have that whole range, right? You have things sitting next to each other, and you can always just like shift them up and down a little bit using the margins. Okay. All right. So same thing with these yellow ones. I need to make them into inline blocks so that they can sit next to each other, right? So I'm going to change this yellow one to display inline block. Okay. So it looks like this. So again, I could add a left margin to my yellow one to get it to move over, or I can just add a padding to my red one, right? Since it goes all the way around. So I'm going to add a padding to my red block. So here, padding 15 pixels. Okay. And then you'll notice that there's this margin here between the yellow blocks, right? Even though right now the margin is, I haven't set a margin on the yellow ones. Okay. This is because there's by default actually it's like a margin of -4 pixels. Okay. So there's, whenever you have these inline blocks sitting next to each other, I think same thing with inline, right? There's always a default of 4 pixels. Okay. This is because like they want the page to look okay, even if there's like no CSS styling, right? So the browser and like CSS, HTML, they just basically decided to have some default mode, right? Just like if you're writing like a bunch of text, right? You wouldn't want all the words just go right next to each other. You want like little mistakes, right? So they just decided to build that in. So we have to work with it, okay? So if you wanted to get rid of this, you could set like a -4 pixel margin, though generally it's not advised to set negative margins. There's actually like a number of different workarounds. They're a little screwy. The other workaround is that you can do something like this. Okay, so for some reason, if you do not have any white space between your divs on the HTML, it will get rid of that. Okay, so this is one solution. The other solution is you just like string them all together, right? Like basically by adding these comments here, between here and here, I have no white space in my HTML. This is the equivalent of doing this. Okay, and that's why it works. Okay. They're all kind of weird workarounds. I think my preferred workaround would probably be this, so that you're not really like having to go with a negative margin. But different people prefer different ones. At any rate, though, we need a bigger margin here, so I'm going to actually add a margin. So I'm going to say margin right. Okay. And I guess you would want more if you had this all around, but I'll just get rid of these for now. Okay. Take care of that. And then I have to move the purple one down, right? So again, I can add a bottom margin on the yellow, or I can add a top margin on the purple. Since all three of the yellow ones are reusing the same class, so you may have noticed that there's this hashtag for this one, right? Hashtag is for IDs, dots for classes. Since there's multiple things that have the subcontents class, right? We have a class subcontents that has the same styling, then we're using class. Anytime you only have one, then you're using the ID, okay? So anytime you see a reusable pattern, you should be thinking class, right? I could give each of these subcontents like a different ID. Like I could say subcontent 1, ID subcontent 1, ID subcontent 2, ID subcontent 3. But the CSS styling will be exactly the same for all three of them. And so you want to reuse your code and simplify your code. And also, if you know they're going to have the same pattern, if you adjust one, like if you want to be able to just adjust it in one place so that it can like sort of propagate throughout the rest of your code, right? So it's better to use classes when you have reusable pieces. Okay. So I'm going to add a bottom margin. Bottom. That's it. I could add like a margin right to my blue one to make it like line up a little bit better. The rest is just like sort of fine tuning. Okay. Yep.
For the subcontinents, you know how you said how inline blocks default at like 4 pixel spacing? When you set like margin right to 10, are you adding 10 pixels or are you saying it to 10?
So you are adding 10 pixels. So 0 pixel margin will have 4 pixels of showing, basically, right? So that's why like when I had this guy here, it's actually like a slightly different margin. Like this one's like slightly smaller than
10,
that.
10, 14.
Yeah, it's like 10, 14. Yeah. Even though I'm specifying 10. A good question. Any other questions on this?
So you said don't use negative margin. I use it a lot.
You should know. Okay, so here's the thing. Like the reason people say not to use negative margin is because it's like abused and like overused. Okay, so when you have like okay, if I want a space between this red and blue one, right, of like 10, right, I should have one call out where I'm giving like the right margin of 10 on the blue to get the red here, rather than like a right margin of like 20 and then a left margin of like negative 10, right? Because you're just like, when people start using negative margins, it starts to become like very messy sometimes, right? Because people start doing sort of nonsensical things, right? That like it just that doesn't make for clean code. Okay, so you really you should not use negative margins, and then for now we're probably actually going to go towards the extreme, which is to say like don't use them at all. Okay, like there may be some instances where you could use could kind of need them, and this would be like a reasonable use case for negative margin actually, like this like -4 thing, right? Where it's like this 4 pixels that's defaulted, but because people overuse it so much, we basically kind of make it a rule not to use negative margins while you're here, and you will get docked on the belt exam if you use negative margins. So don't.
So what's the downside of using floats? You said it's not recommended.
Yeah, so the thing with floats is that
In our second structure.
okay, so so floats was not designed for the purposes that it's been used for, right? So like 15 years ago or whatever, right, when CSS was newer, like we didn't have quite as many methods to use, right? And the design of float was for like page prints, right? So if you had like let's say you had like a paper print, like a page print of like a magazine or something, right? You had like an image here, and like an image here or something, right? You would want your text to basically wrap around. So that's like the purpose of our flow. It was never like intended for like positioning so much, right? People found out they could use it for positioning, and so they started doing that. I think that I've heard from people who work in industry who do a lot of CSS that there are times where you like need it. So I don't know that you should make a hard and fast rule for it, but I'll also say that I've yet to see a time where I personally needed it. Where without that I couldn't get by with basically just using inline blocks and stuff, right? And I find this a lot cleaner than using floats, because when you use floats, if you make changes, it's also really easy for things to just start like looping around in different orders, and you also have to like order your HTML a little bit differently, right? And so like than what you would normally expect, and so the code just becomes a much messier, basically. I think if you're working in industry and like you receive like someone else's code base and it's already like structured a certain way, and like particularly if they are using floats, it may be worthwhile to add an additional float than have to refactor all of it, because it might be simpler. But at least for these like projects we're doing from scratch here, you shouldn't need to use it. Any other questions? Yeah.
So when I was working on this,
Mm-hmm.
I was so I used that float also for the import,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd always get it down here. I couldn't get this part, so then I watched the next video. So it said you can position it, but you can put position in top, then you put pixels in it. So I was was just raising it for me until I got to that one spot.
You added like a margin or something, or you added what? Position what?
Position, then in the bottom, then put top, then you put the pixel on. That's what I did, and I saw like, I would just put like 100 pixel and just move up until I aligned it with the group.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the right way to
Let me take a look at it later. I mean, we can talk about it. There's definitely more than one way to build some of these things. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'll move on to the next part now. I want to show you guys how to build the Firefox page. So, let's see, I have this thing. Okay, so when you start out with building a new page, my recommendation for you is you actually turn the page into a plot blocks assignment, basically. Okay? And then after you have the plot blocks assignment, then you can do basically the bigger like layout, and then you can fill in the smaller pieces afterwards, right? So you start from like sort of the bigger picture, get all the sizes and widths like basically set up so that everything is already basically in the right position, right? You know, maybe leave off the minor tweaking for a little while, but everything relative to each other is in the right position, and then you can add in the smaller components. Right? And that way things sort of stay organized without having to like jumble around as you're adding pieces. Okay, so if I was to start out with this, right, I would probably have one big wrapper for the entire page, right, and then I would add a another container, another div, basically this top header portion, right. And then I would add maybe a div for like this portion right here. Actually, let me just draw this out. Okay. So I'm gonna have one container here for like, the top header, right? And then I would probably have maybe like another one here with like for like the links, and also some stuff here. Right? And then I would have another one over here for like this header and this. And then I would have one big one here, one big one here, and one big one here. Okay. So these main blocks, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? I would just give each of them different colors, and then I would plot those out first. That's my first step. Okay. And then I would basically, go into each one. So I think sometimes people will use borders on these instead of using background colors. I much prefer using background colors even if it's not the final color I'm going to be using. The reason for that is because the border changes everything. Okay? Like the border will add that extra width, and that causes things to move around a little bit, and things may not line up. Whereas the background color doesn't. So that's my personal preference. So I'll start with building this out a little bit. So let's say I was to make another directory, Mozilla _041917. Okay, and then I'm going to make a Mozilla.html. And then I'm going to make a Mozilla.css. So the first thing I do when I make a new file is I just make sure everything lines up correctly. Okay, so you guys know about that? You type HTML here, hit tab, and it'll create this template for you. Okay. So I just want to make sure that these files are connected. So chain is here. Okay. So I do that first, and then I add a single color. And this just helps me make sure that I'm like loading the page correctly. So I go to this. And I can grab this guy and drag it here. Okay. And something's missing, right? So what I'm missing is exactly. So I have to add this to here. And I have to say link style. Is it what I call nose.css? I don't remember what the rel equals style should be. I'm just gonna copy this. There we go. Okay, great, right? So now I have everything linked up. I'm gonna start building it out. Okay, so I will go into here and I will start building up my divs. So I'm gonna have a wrapper, right, for everything. And then inside that, I'm gonna have a, I'm gonna call the top one like top header, or top bar. And then call this one here, the link bar. And the next one is going to be the header bar. And this one I'm going to call right, no, left column. Good. One thing I also like to do is sometimes as your page gets longer, it's hard to tell like which div is closing div is corresponding to what. So I'll say like end of wrapper or something. Right? Just makes it a little bit easier for me to read. Add this comment. And then I mean you could do that for these two. I generally only do it if like I know the div is starting to get really big. Right? So I have all these pieces. Now I can make these, give them a size and a width. Right? So top bar is this. I'm going to say width is wrapper. Let's say I have a width of 980 pixels. Okay. Let's say this one's also 980 pixels. Let's say I'm giving this a color. This. And let's say I have my link bar. Link bar. I'm going to give it like a width of like 60 pixels. I'm going to have margin width to auto. And give this one like blue. Okay. The auto part allows tells what you are centering to move to the side. So if you have like a div like this, right? This is your wrapper, okay? And then you have another div here. Auto sets it so that this width is the same as this one. Do you need to write div before the hashtag? You do not need to. There is like a different priority list. I think it's on the Learn platform, right? Of like classes and divs and stuff, right? So it just makes it a little bit more specific. But no, you don't need to. I need to set heights for these two. So I'm gonna give this one like 1,000 pixels, and I'll give this one like 120 pixels. I'll give this one okay, so I have these pieces now. Okay. And so this 0 pixel margin, pixel auto, right, is what keeps it in the center of the page. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay, so yeah, I have these pieces. I'm going to, I should build out the rest of them. Okay, I'm not going to bother to do that right now, but I should just basically lay out the other ones, right, with all these blocks based on what sizes they're at, right? And then I step into like one of them, let's say this top one, and I start adding the individual divs for each of these, right? So I would do something like this, where I would go to this top bar, and I would add like, let's say a div for the search bar. Div for Mozilla. And another, and then like an image. Like that. And then another like unsorted list, right, with different list items. So look at that. And then I would add all the styling for those to position things. So let's see, I have a search bar in Mozilla. Search bar. And I would probably want to keep this underneath the top bar. If I want to be more specific, I could say something like this, the pound top bar. Right? If you don't need it, there's only one ID, it's only going to show up once, and should only show up once anyways, but you could do that if you wanted. It might look a little cleaner if you organize everything with the top bar. Okay, so I'll give also like another width and height and background color. So this one will be a lot smaller. So I can just make this like 100 pixels, make the height like 30 pixels, make this one green. And then I have the Mozilla and the UL as well. So I could add this. Mozilla. Make this one like red. And then so you build out all your blocks, right? You have all of them there. You can then position all of them. Okay? So that's kind of like roughly the flow of how we build this. Okay? And I try to after I have everything in their relative positions, right? And then after that I start like modifying some of the margins a little bit and tweaking it, making it look like more pixel perfect. Okay. All right, it's 11 o'clock, so we should be going to sports day really soon. At 2 o'clock, I want us to start our group activity. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys another image similar to this one. I'm going to have you guys whiteboard out how to build that in groups, and then you guys can work on building it in groups. Okay? So just make sure you're back here by 2 o'clock, so we need to start pretty promptly at 2. I will also need to take off a little early today, so I'm going to be taking up about 4:10. Okay? All right, that's it. Thanks, everyone.
About that assignment.